The 1920s was a wild time. The First World War was over. People felt free. Money was flowing. New things popped up everywhere. Cars, radios, movies. Everyone wanted something new to see, something exciting to do. Life before the war had been pretty strict. Now, people wanted to let loose. They wanted thrills. They wanted to forget the hard times and enjoy life. This was the jazz age. People were dancing, drinking, and doing things that were a little crazy. And into this world stepped Alvin Shipwreck Kelly. He wasn't just some guy. Kelly was a showman. He had done all sorts of wild things. He walked tightropes. He jumped off high places. He once rode a bike down the steps of a Capitol building. He knew how to get people to look at him. He knew how to make a spectacle. He lived for attention. One day in 1924, Kelly was looking for his next big stunt. A friend, a promoter, dared him that you can't sit on a flagpole for a whole day. Kelly took that dare. He sat on a flagpole in Hollywood, California. He stayed up for 13 hours and 13 minutes. So it was just a weird thing to do. No one had really done it like that before. It was strange. It was different. People looked up and stared. They talked about it. This first sit was a big deal, but it was just the start. Kelly kept doing it. He sat on poles for publicity, maybe for a new movie theater opening, maybe for a department store sale. He once sat for 24 hours at a department store in New York City. Then he did 28 hours, then more. Each time, more people came to watch. They brought their families. They pointed up at him. They wondered how he did it. Kelly wasn't just sitting. He was putting on a show. He would wave at the crowds. He would do little tricks. He had food hoisted up to him. He was like a king on his tiny throne way up high. He seemed to enjoy every minute of it. Or at least, he acted like he did. The newspapers loved him. They wrote stories about him all the time. Shipwreck Kelly sits again. The headlines would scream. This was newsworthy. It was lighthearted. It was a break from everyday life. People loved reading about it. They loved talking about it. Why did this catch on so fast? I think it was the perfect stunt for the perfect time. People had more money. They had more free time. They were hungry for entertainment that wasn't just sitting in a theater. This was live. It was dangerous. It was a man against gravity and boredom. It was a simple idea, but it was really powerful. It showed human endurance. It showed a bit of craziness. And in the 1920s, a bit of craziness was exactly what everyone wanted. Kelly tapped into that feeling. He showed everyone that you could be famous just for doing something totally pointless but incredibly difficult. And that idea that you could get famous for being weird and strong, that spread like wildfire. Shipwreck Kelly started it, but he didn't keep it all to himself. People saw him up there. They saw the crowds. They saw the newspaper stories. And some people thought, I can do that. Or, I can do that better. That's how things work. One person does something wild, and then others try to outdo them. It's human nature, I guess. So, the fire started to spread. It wasn't just professional daredevils anymore. It was regular people, kids mostly. Teenagers looking for a thrill, young men wanting to make a name for themselves. They saw Flagpole sitting as a way to get noticed, a way to be famous, even if just for a little while, in their own town. Soon, every town seemed to have a flagpole sitter, or a few. They'd set up their little perches on top of buildings. Or, yes, on actual flagpoles. Sometimes it was just a small wooden platform, sometimes it was nothing more than a bicycle seat nailed to the top of a pole. It wasn't about comfort, it was about staying up there. The competitive part really took off. Kelly had set a record. Then someone else tried to beat it. Then another. The records kept getting broken. Kelly himself kept coming back to reclaim his title. He stayed up for weeks, then months. In 1930, he set a record of 49 days and 1 hour in Atlantic City, New Jersey. He became known as the Dean of Flagpole Sitters. But even he couldn't stop others from trying. Local communities got really into it. A flagpole sitter in town became a huge event. People would gather below the pole. They'd bring picnic lunches, they'd shout encouragement, they'd cheer when the sitter waved. It was free entertainment, and it brought people together. Towns would sometimes even sponsor a sitter. They'd promise prizes if the person stayed up long enough. This made it even more exciting. It gave the sitters a real goal. The logistics of sitting on a pole for days or weeks were pretty basic. There were no fancy gadgets. Food would be hoisted up in a bucket, water too. Sometimes a rope would be used to pull up a newspaper. For sleeping, they just lean against the pole. Or, if they were lucky, they had a small plank to lie on. They'd tie themselves to the pole so they wouldn't fall off if they nodded off. And for going to the bathroom, well, That was simple too. Another bucket, and then it would be lowered to the ground. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't comfortable, but it worked. The media was a big reason this craze went national. Newspapers were huge back then. No internet, no TV, just radio and newspapers, and the papers were hungry for stories. A flagpole sitter was a perfect story. It had drama, it had human interest, they'd print updates every day. Young Jimmy Smith hits day 5 on the Main Street pole. They'd talk about the weather the sitter faced. They'd report on the crowds. This constant reporting just fueled the fire. It made people want to see it for themselves. It made more kids want to try it. It really became a big deal. It wasn't just a quirky thing anymore. It was a national phenomenon. From big cities to small towns, people were looking up. They were watching. They were talking about who would be the next person to climb up there and stay. It was a strange kind of American dream for a short time. So why do people do it? Why climb up a pole and sit there for days or weeks? It seems crazy, but if you think about the time and what people wanted, it makes a little more sense. There were a few big reasons, I think, that drew people to the top of those poles. One huge reason was fame, or at least attention. In the 1920s, getting noticed wasn't easy. There was no social media. You couldn't just post a video and go viral. If you wanted people to know your name, you had to do something big. Something daring, something unusual. Flagpole sitting was perfect for that. For a few days or a few weeks, you were the most talked about person in town. People would point you out. Newspapers would write about you. You'd have a moment in the spotlight. For young people especially, that was a powerful draw. Imagine being the hero of your town just for sitting on a pole. It had a real pull. Then there was the money, or the prizes. Sometimes it wasn't just about fame. Businesses, theaters, or even town councils would offer rewards. A local store might give you a cash prize if you beat the record. A theater might offer free tickets for a year. These weren't huge fortunes, but for many, it was enough to make the effort worthwhile. It was a chance to earn a little something, just by being tough and patient. Another big factor was defiance, or rebellion. Young people have always pushed against what's normal. Flagpole sitting was a way to do that. It wasn't hurting anyone, it wasn't illegal, but it was definitely not what adults expected you to do. It was a way to show you were your own person. You could endure something others couldn't. You could choose to spend your time in a completely different way. It was a quiet form of rebellion, just sitting there high above everyone else. And for some, it was an escape. Maybe from a boring job, maybe from a small town where nothing ever happened. Up on the pole, you were literally above it all. You had a different view of the world. You were challenged in a unique way. It was a way to break from the routine, to feel alive, to experience something truly different. The sheer challenge of it, pushing your limits, was a motivation for many. Also, it really became a community thing. When a local kid went up on the pole, the whole town often rallied around them. People would bring food, and they'd set up blankets below, they'd cheer. It created a sense of shared excitement. The sitter wasn't just an individual anymore, they represented the town's spirit. It was like a local sports team, but with one person doing something really odd. This sense of local pride and support certainly encouraged more people to try it. And finally, it was just pure daredevilry, the simple act of testing your endurance. How long can I last? Can I handle the sun, the rain, the wind? Can I beat the last record? It was a personal challenge, a test of mental and physical toughness. People have always been fascinated by feats of endurance, whether it's running a marathon or climbing a mountain. Flagpole sitting was just another version of that human desire to push limits. For the public, watching was just as compelling. It was human drama. You saw someone up there, vulnerable, exposed to the elements. You wondered if they would fall. You admired their grit. It was a live show, happening right in front of you, day after day. It was simple, raw entertainment. And that's why people watched, and why more people sat. Life up on a flagpole was not easy. It sounds simple, just sit there. But imagine doing it for days, or weeks, or even months. It took a huge toll on the body and the mind. It was a real test of endurance, much harder than it looked from the ground. Physically, the sitters suffered a lot. Their muscles would get stiff and ache. They couldn't move around much, so their bodies got weak. They were exposed to everything. The hot sun would beat down on them, causing sunburn and dehydration. Then the rain would come, soaking them through. The wind would howl, making it hard to hold on. At night, it could get really cold. Sleep was a big problem. They'd tie themselves to the pole to keep from falling if they drifted off. But deep, restful sleep was almost impossible. They were always a bit tired, a bit uncomfortable. Mentally, it was also incredibly tough. Imagine the boredom. Hours and hours of just looking at the same view. Nothing to read, nothing to do. The loneliness must have been immense, even with crowds below. The crowds came and went, but the sitters stayed. There was also the constant fear. Fear of falling, fear of getting sick, fear of a storm that could blow them off. All of this combined meant a lot of stress. Some sitters probably started to feel a bit crazy after a while. The logistics, as I mentioned, were basic. Food was hauled up in buckets, sandwiches, fruit, water. Sometimes hot coffee if they were lucky. Waste also went into a bucket, which was then lowered. It was all very public and very undignified, but it had to be done. There were no hidden bathrooms up there. And the dangers were real. People did fall. Sometimes it was fatal. Lightning strikes were a risk, and strong winds could dislodge them. Sickness was a constant threat. Being stuck on a pole, unable to get proper medical care, was serious. People on the ground were often worried. They'd sometimes call for the sitter to come down, especially if the weather turned bad. Despite the risks, the sitters kept going, and the public kept watching. There was a mix of feelings from the crowd. Admiration, for sure, for their bravery and toughness. Concern, especially from parents watching kids. But sometimes there was also a bit of mockery. Some people just thought it was foolish. They'd shout insults or try to distract the sitters, but mostly it was pure fascination. Sometimes friends or family would act as a kind of ground crew. They'd bring up food. They'd talk to the sitter, trying to keep their spirits up. They'd monitor the weather. They'd basically be the support system for the person stuck up high. It took a village sometimes to keep a flagpole sitter going. How long did people really stay up? Shipwreck Kelly, the famous one, hit 49 days. But other lesser-known sitters sometimes went even longer. Some tried to beat that record. One guy reportedly stayed up for 211 days. That's almost 7 months. Think about that for a second. It's almost half a year living on a small platform on a pole. It's truly amazing and a little bit insane to imagine the dedication and suffering involved in such a feat. It shows how strong the human will can be, even for something as strange as sitting on a flagpole. Like all crazes, flagpole sitting didn't last forever. It was a big deal for a few years, but eventually people moved on. Things that seem exciting and new can get old really fast, and that's pretty much what happened here. There were a few reasons why the flagpole sitting craze faded away. First, the novelty wore off. When Shipwreck Kelly first did it, it was unheard of. It was fresh, it was exciting. But after a few years, after hundreds of people had sat on hundreds of poles, it wasn't new anymore. People had seen it, they knew what it was all about. The thrill was gone, it became just another thing, not a unique spectacle. Once something loses its magic, it's hard to get it back. Then came the Great Depression. This was a huge blow. The happy, free-spending 1920s ended with a crash in 1929. Suddenly, people didn't have money. They didn't have jobs. Survival became the main thing on everyone's mind. Who cared about a kid sitting on a flagpole when you couldn't put food on the table? There was no leisure time for watching such things. Businesses couldn't afford to sponsor sitters. The mood of the country completely changed. Frivolous entertainment just didn't fit the times anymore. People had bigger worries than who could sit on a pole the longest. New entertainment also started to pop up. Movies with sound, called talkies, became hugely popular. Radio shows offered dramas, comedies, and music right in people's homes. New sports gained followers. These were more comfortable ways to be entertained. You could sit in a dark movie theater or listen to the radio by the fire. You didn't have to stand outside staring up at a person on a pole. The competition for people's attention got tougher. Public fatigue played a part too. After a while, hearing about another flagpole sitter, another broken record, just became tiresome. How many times can you get excited about the same thing? The constant stream of news about these stunts became less thrilling and more just a regular occurrence. Or people just got bored of it. It was like a joke that wasn't funny anymore. And then there were the safety concerns. As more people tried it, there were more incidents. More falls, more injuries, even deaths. This made some people see flagpole sitting not as a daring feat, but as a dangerous, foolish activity. Public opinion started to turn against it. Some towns even banned it. They saw it as a liability, not a source of pride. The fun was slowly being drained out of it by the very real risks involved. By the mid-1930s, flagpole sitting was mostly over. It popped up now and then, but never again as a national craze. It became a weird footnote in history. But it tells us a lot about the 1920s. It was a time of wanting to stand out, to be different, to break rules, and to find new ways to entertain ourselves. It showed the human desire for attention, the need for a challenge, and the power of a simple spectacle to capture the imagination of a nation. It was a strange, wild ride, and then, like everything else, it ended.